Welcome to the Genealogy Radio Show, and this is the radio show that keeps you in the loop. We air from beautiful Kilkee in County Clare. We go out to most parts of the world now, and we're now in Series 11, and we're looking at advanced factors of genealogy today. Today we're very lucky. We have a lovely guest, Lyn Stewart, who's online with us, and we're looking at a publication. And Lyn has retired from work, and lot of great reason to take up genealogy, and she had time to research and write her Irish family history, which is absolutely fascinating. She has also written a book about an English ancestor who was one of the first free settlers arriving in Australia. She claims at least 5 convict ancestors in her background, and she says Australians are not ashamed and they wear their convict ancestry as a badge of honour. But her Irish great-great-grandmother was not a convict. She was a bounty immigrant, and she came from Tipperary. She had a government-subsidised fare to New South Wales, and Margaret Murphy, together with 4 of her sisters, arrived in Sydney in January 1841. So Lyn has researched the Murphy family and published a book. And this is a very, very welcome offering in the world of advanced genealogy, and a really interesting story, but an excellent book. The title of the book is Searching for Margaret Murphy, From Tipperary to New South Wales, A Murphy Family History. So Lyn, welcome to the Genealogy Radio Show.
Thank you, Lorna. Lovely to be here.
You're very, very welcome. And was Margaret Murphy from County Tipperary or the town of Tipperary?
She was from the town of Cahir in County Tipperary. So her parents were innkeepers at the Glen Gaul Arms Hotel, which is situated on one side of the town square. The building's still there, although it's not currently a hotel.
Well, you had some quest with a name like Murphy, and just tell us a little bit about the book and your journey and so on, because it's fascinating stuff.
Oh, thanks, Lorna. Yes, it's been a wonderful project, the whole project. After 4 trips to Ireland, the first 3 trips were research trips. And I had to keep going back because I was discovering so much more. So these were quite well-known Murphys, luckily. But to sort out, why, whether they were my Murphys or not, I was lucky because there was a document which my great-great-grandmother, Margaret Murphy, had brought with her to Australia. And I didn't see it until a few years ago. It was with a distant cousin, but when I did get to see it, it was on vellum. It was an 1801 document. It was the marriage agreement for Margaret Murphy's parents. So there was a dowry involved. And so it gave me a head start on the family, because it gave me the names of the parents of the groom and the names of 2 brothers of the bride, and so I discovered the Murphys of Cahir. This was a marriage between Murphys, so the Murphys of Cashel. One of the daughters was marrying one of the Murphys of Cahir.
Very interesting.
So and there was the document told me that that the Murphys of Cahir had the lease of a hotel, a lease dating back to 1781. For the, I think it was, at first it was called the New Inn, but later the name changed to the Glen Gaul Arms, because Lord Cahir was given the title of the Earl of Glen, Gaul, and in deference to that, the Murphys changed the name to the Glen Gaul Arms Hotel. So they held the hotel. They held it until 1833, when the Earl of Glen Gaul was trying to rescue back some of his, a lot of his properties in his Cahir estate, and he gave the Murphys, he evicted the Murphys. So before their lease was up, their lease had been a 61-year lease. Many of the leases in Cahir had been that length. They were long leases.
Yes, 3 lifetimes and so on. So it's quite significant in the fact that these leases, where landlords get into trouble in the 19th century, they start doing clearances and consolidation. Yes. And the idea that everybody's a poor tenant with 1 acre or half an acre or little land or little resources isn't true. I would have got this from Kenneth Nichols as well, where he talked about how once the leases were up, it impoverished those who had been upper middle class. Mm. So they would have been even the step above middle class and been very well-to-do, especially with these type of marriage contracts and alliances happening with marriages as well. So yes, where did you discover the source for the Murphys and the parliamentary source, which was fascinating?
Right. Yes. The evidence that the Earl of Glen Gaul had actually evicted the Murphys. Yes, that was from a report. The name of it is the Report from Her Majesty's Commissioners of Inquiry into the state of the law and practice in respect of the occupation of land in Ireland. So I looked at volume 3, section 1098, from pages 888 to 893. And that was evidence that the Earl of Glen Gaul gave to that commission of inquiry. So he was defending his actions.
Yes.
So, but he does say that he evicted the Murphys from the hotel.
That's absolutely fantastic. It's fantastic research as well, Lyn, and a lot of credit due to you for this, because these are really valuable findings. They're not just transparent findings, and it's not easy work. And I know I'll be getting a copy of this book, because it's certainly one for a reference source. It's covering all the important stuff here. It's really, really good.
That's great. And let me tell you about a follow-up to that evidence, well, to that situation where quite a few people in the town of Cahir, in and around the town of Cahir, were evicted, and the population were upset about it, and one of the local priests wrote to Daniel O'Connell with a complaint about the Earl of Glen Gaul doing this, and Daniel O'Connell had it read out, or I think he read it in Parliament. So the Earl of Glen Gaul was criticised in this. So I've got a reference to that too, but luckily it was one of the local historians who had written about the priest's action in that, and it was in a local historical newsletter about the local church. And but because I'd met this local historian, he pointed it out to me.
And who was the local historian?
The local historian was Joe Walsh.
Lovely.
Have you heard of him before?
Yes.
Okay. He was very helpful person to me.
Well, that's great. And that's what it means. It's one thing to have archives and records online, but when you're trying to get to the meat of the situation, you do need to contact people who have the local knowledge.
Yes.
This is true for burials, where people are buried, what happens. So the other records, such as the tie, the plotments, I use these a great deal, by the way.
Yes. The
And
tie, the plotments for care were, they were, or the Griffith valuation was done after the Murphy girls had left care. But nevertheless, those records did give me information about properties that had been and were owned by the Murphys or leased by them. But it was the Dublin Land Deeds Office that was most, well, that was where I started, because I had this document, the marriage agreement. I went to the deeds office to see if it was registered there, and sure enough it was. But to walk into the deeds office and see that place is like, it's amazing. It's like walking into Harry Potter's library at Hogwarts. It's a much more interesting building and interior than any of our land records here in Sydney, I can tell you that. Much more interesting.
Wonderful.
Anyway, as you know,
there's a project, and it's online. So the Registry of Deeds project is online, and it's a really, and another source. It's the encumbered, the land courts records, and the auction catalogues are from the encumbered estate and land court records, which we covered last week on the genealogy show as well.
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
So the Earl of Glen Gaul estate, that would have been advertised in the newspapers. It's part of these estate programs, and that was up for auction in 1853. So
yes,
just to draw attention to that, that's. So what happened to the Murphy sisters in Australia? How many of them went? There was nine sisters, or nine in the family, 8 girls, 1 boy.
9 children, 1 boy. The first 5, I think it's the first 5 born girls went. My great-great-grandmother was the eldest, Margaret, born in 1802, I think. But because the baptismal records for care are missing in a certain period of missing from the late 1700s in, I can't remember the date, 1809 or something like that. Yeah,
that's right. There can be gaps in the parish registers.
But I picked up the baptism records for the other children born later.
Lovely.
Including the brother.
So they went off, how many traveled together, and she was a teacher, wasn't she? Employed by Caroline?
No, well, interestingly, the 5 girls, of course, they had to fill out some paperwork in order to get the accepted for the bounty subsidy. The bounty subsidy was paid to the shipper, the shipping company, the company that took responsibility for sending them, and that was paid in Sydney after arrival, and after an immigration officer, mustered the immigrants, mustered the passengers, and got the paperwork from them. So my great-great-grandmother said she was a housekeeper, and I assume that she, as the eldest girl, that she worked beside her mother in running the hotel, because I discovered that Margaret's father also had either a brewery or a distillery.
Yeah.
Not far from the town square, and I think they also had another inn, a more humble place. The Glengall Arms was, I think it's 3 stories. It's a magnificent. It was a great hotel. It had a great reputation in Ireland for people to stay. It was a favourite place.
So Margaret Murphy went to Hunter Valley, north of Sydney, and she met your great-great-grandfather, a ticket of leave man.
Yes.
And that was a kind of convict probation, yeah?
That's right. So when the girls arrived in Sydney, I'm absolutely sure now that they met a person who is very famous in Australia, Caroline Chisholm. Caroline Chisholm did a lot for single female immigrants. She had a home, what she called the home for female immigrants in Sydney, and I'm on a project on that at the moment. And the Irish don't know much about her, as I've discovered, but she did a lot for Irish immigrants, particularly single women. Anyway, they met her, and one of the sisters, I think it's Catherine, was employed as a teacher by Caroline Chisholm in a school. It was out of Sydney at a place called Windsor on the Hawkesbury River. One of the other sisters went with Catherine to Windsor, and a few months after her arrival, she married the son of the local draper. And then one of the other sisters seems to have disappeared out of Sydney for 10 years, and I think it's because she must have been a governess or a teacher to a family that were out of Sydney, and she returned to Sydney 10 years later, and then she married. But my great-great-grandmother went to the Hunter Valley to a place called it was called Patrick's Plains. It's now called Singleton. And I think, I've only got circumstantial evidence, but I think she was employed in a new hotel. It was a new building, and anyway, 18 months later, lo and behold, she has a baby. And she's 41 years of age by then, which is interesting. Very. And the father is my great-great-grandfather, who was a ticket of leave man. Yes.
Well, we're delighted that they did that, because we've got this wonderful account now from you, which is fantastic, because it's quite a journey that you've had on your research. Is the book available in Ireland? I hope so. Where can I buy this book?
So there are copies that are in the Tipperary libraries. There's one definitely at the local studies part of the Thurles Library.
Can we buy it online? Do you have an e-version that you sell online, Lyn, or anything? Because I know there'll be an awful lot of interest in this.
No, I haven't got any. It's self-published, so I don't have an e-version, unfortunately.
Okay.
Look, if you'd like to give people my email address, if they're interested, I will send the book. However, there are some copies at the local studies part of Thurles Library, which are available.
I just suppose people can't travel at the moment, so this is the kind of book that would be of interest to them. So I do foresee that you'll be doing another print run of this. I can guarantee you that, because this is the type of information. This is like hen's teeth. Have you ever heard that expression, hen's teeth, which are very rare? You know, so I have. Wonderful account. Now,
I've still got four boxes of books, so yes, I can supply.
Fabulous, Lyn. And that's, you know, the Earl of Glen Gaul was a title created out of the Cahir one in the around 1816, and it died after there was only 2 Earls of Glen Gaul, the first and the second in the 19th century. So just for our listeners to realise that some of these baronetcies are later creations, not earlier manifestations. And I'm going to stop recording now because that's all for the genealogy, but you'll hold online, Lyn. But thanks very much for listening, folks. This show is going out. We're definitely going to have Lyn on again. And because I'd like to interview Lyn about Catherine Chisholm and that type of work. That's really important, and what networks and collaborations it leads to. So
Caroline Chisholm.
Caroline Chisholm, yeah. And really, really excellent research here, and a fascinating journey of the Murphys to Australia, and even the whole language of, you know, how they got there, the bounty and the money and all that kind of aspect of how people journeyed at that time. So the show goes out on Thursday at 4:00, and it'll be podcast also, so you'll be able to pick it up on podcast and repeat it on Sunday. And that's all for today, folks. Thanks for listening.